Hi, and welcome to the Metamorphosis Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Elliott. On this show, we get to explore anything and everything, self-realization, personal transformation. And in my favorite way of doing that is in relationship to others. I really love to just dive into these conversations and hear other people's stories and journeys and the wisdom that they've gained from going through really difficult places. And today, I'm really excited to have a special guest. His name is Nate Feathers. I came across Nate a few weeks ago. Somebody had sent me a link to one of his videos, and 10 seconds in, I was crying. And I was like, oh man, just what Nate's sharing just speaks to that passion place inside of me, is like to how to show up as a father in a new way with more mindfulness, understanding that how I show up as a father impacts the development of my my son Cedar. And I could really feel that from Nate, and I just immediately got the hit. I'm like, man, we got to hop on a podcast episode and just kind of dive in a little deeper. And so thank you, Nate, for being here.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Nate's handle is Dads Don't Babysit. And so why don't we start off there? I'd love to hear and give us some background of where that name came from. What's the story
Yeah,
there?
absolutely. Well, as a father of six, you really can't be a babysitter, in my opinion. But that actually came from a conversation with friends. It's weird because I've learned more about this whole this whole part of my psyche and my thought process from my dad, even just in a conversation recently. But I'll tell you that part in a sec. But I was on a conversation with a friend. I think I was 4 kids in at this time, and he had just had his first baby. And he was talking to me, and he said, "Hey, man, if you hear the little one, I've got him. I'm holding him, and I'm babysitting right now. So just to let you know." Well, one, I usually tell people, hey, there's chances are a half naked kid is coming across the screen when we're talking, because that is life. They are actually at friends' houses right now because it's spring break, and so my oldest is upstairs. Other than that, you probably won't have that in this, but a lot of times podcasting, I gotta like shove my little girl away because she doesn't have any clothes on, and I'm like, you can't be on screen like that, that kind of thing. So like for me, I'm like, yeah, dude, just whatever. But the moment he said that, I was like, hey, hang on one second, I gotta address this. Like, you're not babysitting.
Mhm.
And I think I may have actually said you're dadding. Like you're it's a verb. Like, you are literally being the dad to that baby boy. And everything about what you're doing is, in my opinion, is exactly right. So that really came from this whole concept of, yeah, no, we don't babysit. Don't count me as a babysitter. I don't want to think that way. I don't think other men should think that way.
Mhm.
Truthfully, the further in that I get into this, the more responsibility I lay on father's shoulders.
Mhm.
That to call us that or to think that way as men is just childish, in my opinion, and to a level of like, you cannot, don't devalue who you are and what you do in the lives of your own children so much as to say that you're the same as like a teenager who watches them while your wife goes on a date. You know what I mean? Like, that's not,
Mhm.
it's not the same. And so I said that, and I actually was talking with my dad like a couple of weeks ago, and he's actually like, yeah, I used to say that same thing when you were younger. I had no idea. I had no idea. I don't even know if I've ever heard him say that ever, but it's something that he even said that he said when I was growing up. So
Mhm.
I
Oh
guess it
my.
runs deep in the family.
Oh, deep in the family. And man, I know that place in me. And it's like when you're sharing it, it's like I remember that part of my journey moving into being a father where I watched myself say the same thing.
Hmm.
And, when I feel into that, especially when you're sharing it, my thoughts on that is, this deep collective masculine shame and
Mm.
disconnect of what the role of father even is, and not being
Yeah.
initiated into that role from like our fathers and their fathers, and I'm
Yeah.
curious on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, actually, it's crazy that you said that because even as I was talking, that's where my head was going, was that
Yeah.
it's like there's not a lot of places for guys. Like all of a sudden you have this kid, and it's not like women don't go through that, but their
Mhm.
body changes, their hormones change, so they also are kind of taught at a young age. Like we don't usually masculine men don't tend to give their sons like baby dolls to care for,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
they're not initiated into it from childhood as like this is how I care for my children. However, I feel like yeah, since the Industrial Revolution, where we started to take our children, at least in the Americas, like we used to take our children and started putting them into school instead of taking them to whether it's the fields or the woods to hunt, whatever it was, as
Mhm.
men, to take our sons specifically into those places and teach them things. That tribal concept is gone. And I said this years ago. It's crazy. The United States, where the United like their independence is a big deal. Well, when I was growing up, they were pushing the concept was individualism, like I'm my own person.
Mhm. Yeah.
And now, and I even said this in like 2008, I was going, yeah, but the next step from that is isolation. And you look at men now, and we're all alone in how we do things. So it's no wonder that when a baby shows up in our house, we're like, I don't even know what I'm doing because we're independent, so independent that we're individualistic and we're totally isolated, and we're
Mhm.
missing out on this whole community of men who went before us, including our fathers, who can say, "Oh yeah, like it's okay. Let me walk you through how you do this. It's okay to like." From my standpoint, I go, my wife isn't going to pick up our 3 year old and toss her into the air. I'm a lot likely to do that with my daughter, but man, dude, I we have a picture of me tossing Finley, who is my 8 year old. I want to say he was 3. I mean, there's a picture of him in the air, somehow looked at the camera, and all of us are looking up at him. It's our Christmas card from that year. And I mean, he is like 10 feet up in the air. Women don't do that, right? Now, what I
Mhm.
didn't know is that you don't do that with a very, very little one because they fear falling, so they'll freak out. I thought I broke Zeke. He was the oldest. I thought I broke him when I did that. Like I was like, whoa, and like let him go. And I caught him, but arms flailed out and he freaked out. And I'm like, what's wrong with this baby? What did I do? Like, aren't I supposed to do these things? So it's like we don't get we don't get shown how to be dads in a way where it's not on purpose. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's not
Mhm.
purposeful, intentional teaching. Whereas I feel like mothers have a tendency to do that more for their daughters,
Mhm.
and it's also acceptable, right?
Mhm.
Because guys who want to care for children, we have a tendency like I don't want to care for somebody else's children. That's not me trying to be a jerk, but like I'm not
Mhm.
the guy that's like, yeah, let me babysit your kids, but like I'm gonna keep track of my own kids and take care of them. And I think that we're not initiated into this idea of how do I care for my children and still be manly at the same time. What does that look like? And we don't really have that.
Yeah. Man, you're just nailing it. And this is the piece, yeah, that I'm really feeling for a lot of men, and you're really hitting it on the head there is like, and how I've watched this play out time and time again is, like you described, like the mother comes in and gives the kids the dolls, and it's like there's this initiation that happens of the relational space. And
Mhm.
for my sense, it's like the feminine, among many, and but one essence of the feminine that's offered in the relationship in the family field is hormonally their focal point is the community piece and is the relational piece. Like
Yeah.
what's happening for my kids, what's happening for my partner, there's a lot of focus and attention, which goes back to those primal stages. It's like, hanging out in the village and gathering, and they would process all day.
Oh
Well,
yeah.
like the men are out gathering, doing, focusing on like that solitude, like connecting with their brothers in the field without like a lot of nonverbal to go and like
Right.
conquer. And then in
Right.
the feminine, it's like, oh, like really sussing out, like, how's the community feeling? Hey, what's coming up for you? And like, so
Yeah.
it's like it's built in them. And what I
Yeah.
find is like the new way, and this is what I was really drawn into the work that you're doing is even just watching your content, feeling you. Like what I get from that is an initiation of brotherhood. So what I find is needed in all these fathers today and these dads is like you can't do it on your own. You were never meant to. I'm so sorry for all that like aloneness and shame. And I'm just like I know where that's lived in me and where it still lives in me is I can't show up in all those roles if it wasn't modeled and if I wasn't held in that way. Like
Yeah.
all the hurts that happened to me of dad not attuning to me because, because mom and dad's relationship was really separate. Like,
Yeah.
how would I expect dad to attune to me? And then how could I attune for my children? So what I feel
Right.
like you bridge is that sense of brotherhood of having the real talk and naming what is needed. And what I really love about what you share too is being real and vulnerable and naming those places that are struggle points of like, oh man, like my one son is like his emotions are so big and that can really trigger stuff coming up for me and like learning like how do I meet my son's needs is what I really heard in that post of like when
Mhm.
he's having really big feelings like whoa what's coming up in me and how do I show up and hold space for that and
Yeah.
not disconnect like that's what I really hear and what you're sharing is like you're bringing in this awareness of like hey man we got to be having these conversations hanging out in the
Yeah.
shame and not talking about it and just recapitulating my imagining is like what happened to you like that's not the way like we
Yeah.
got to be having these conversations and so I'm curious so when that piece came in of like dads don't babysit in this passion project of like supporting men to like really show up as a dad how did it go from like watching those statements happen, watching where it comes up in you,
Sure.
hearing that your dad said it, like how did that then evolve into you now having this page and this following of like
Sure.
spreading this message of being a more conscious dad? Like, where did that come in?
Yeah. Well, I will say that I feel like the what I was putting out started to resonate, right?
Mm,
And then I took a risk on understanding that as things were growing, I took a risk because I had this epiphany moment where uh, I spanked one kid, like my older kids, and it's so funny because my daughter just the other day was like, "Thanks for spanking us, Dad," like, and it was giving me, and I'm like, I already said I feel bad about this, like I'm trying to, all the things, but she was
yeah.
just giving me a bunch of crap about it just to mess with me, but. I did do that, and I remember the feelings. Like it never felt right, but it was what I was. It was what I was taught to do
Uh-huh.
as a parent growing up from my own childhood. That was what was modeled for me, and I wasn't like beaten or anything like that, but it never felt right to me. And like I come from a church background, which is where they say things like spare the rod, spoil the child. And
Mm,
I literally from that verse, I was like, I took a risk and was like, I don't think it means what you think it means. Like I like
mhm,
I went into it and I was like, I loved learning about the cultural historical background of the Bible and the Hebrew scriptures, and so I took that in and was like, wait, they used the rod to like guide the sheep away from the edge of the cliffs, but that was also the weapon they used to protect them. And I was like, oh my gosh, what if it's not spare the rod, spoil the child? Like, don't beat them. They're gonna be a little spoiled brat. But it was if you don't protect them, they will be ruined. And I was like, oh my gosh, that totally changed the way I understood things.
mhm,
And as I did that, and I tend to talk out the way I'm thinking. So I
mhm,
do best when I do that because then it helps me solidify stuff. And the flack that I took for that conversation, I looked at my wife and I said, you cannot read the comments because you will go mama bear on them because she's awesome. She's got my back and everything.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and then I said, but I'm on to something. I said the vehemence and the comments that came from there told me I was going in the right direction. It was almost as if all of those people were the voice of God going, "Yep, run that direction and see where you go." And the page started to grow from there because it really became the change in me. It really started me going, okay, if that's the case, what do I do now? Because I don't know. I've never it's roads I've never traveled, and never had anybody. I mean, I can't name somebody in the church from me growing up that was not an advocate for spanking. You know what I mean? And so it's like,
Mhm, mhm.
how do I connect
Yeah.
with my kids? What did it do to me? And all I want is that also comes on the heels of my oldest going to college, where all of a sudden I don't have him in the house. And that, if you've not experienced that, it's something that you spend your entire life of that 18 years thinking, oh, I got time. Oh, I got time. Oh, I got time. And then
Mhm.
one day you don't have time anymore. And that smashed me in the face.
Yeah.
And all I could think was, there is any father that's going to feel that needs to know what it's going to be like and try to change now, because I would never want to feel this way again with any of my kids. And I don't want any man to feel that
Yeah, that gives me chills.
way. Yeah.
What are some of the like what were some of the biggest pieces that got invoked in you hitting that place of, oh shit, like we're here. Like here he is off to college. Like what started to come up for you in that?
Oh, dude, so much. People always talk about that, um, that like your life flashes before your eyes before
Yeah.
you die. That's what it was like. And
Oh,
it
yeah.
wasn't a death experience. It was, I saw his life. You can make me cry. I saw
Mm.
his life in my house,
Yeah.
and I watched me treat him the way that I did. And I thought, man, I've ruined so many things that I could have made so much better.
Yeah.
And like you see it in me now, it's like I could have done a better job. And I'm like, so it was decisions in that moment where I was like, I should have done better. I should have known better, even though I had no teaching to show me that. And all I thought was, I will not do this with the others.
Mhm.
And now I got to repair all the stuff that I've torn up with my oldest, you know?
Mhm.
And it's crazy. Like, even I get to see, unfortunately, the generational curses brought down
Mhm.
to him because I didn't change it. I didn't live it, and I didn't change. So when I watch him do things, I go, "Oh my God, I do the same thing, and I know why he does it." And it's because, like, the number one thing is, for me, is when I feel like I didn't do something right. It could be something small. I try to hide, and sorry, I don't know if I did I cut out there.
No, you're good.
Okay. If I said, if I don't do something right, even how small, or if I forget to do something, I try to hide it. Because when I look back in my life, I go, and this is memory from today, looking back, but I go, okay, I never felt like I fit in because I didn't do the things that was not required, but understood that we do. Because my brother just did what was, I won't say he did what was easy. He just fit in the family easy, and
Mhm.
I was not. And so I never felt in the same space. I never felt like I was accepted. And that wasn't their fault. They didn't know how to do that. I just did things differently. I thought differently. But there were things, especially growing up in the church, that made me feel shame. And I would try to like hide those things. Right. Yeah. I feel like that resonates with a lot of people.
Mhm.
So I would try to cover them up and keep them hidden. And so I watched that happen in him because he felt ashamed of who he was because of what I was doing to him. And
Mhm.
and so I watch him now do it as a man. I mean, I joke with him and I go, "You're 19. You're a man, but you got a little ways to go." That kind of thing. But it's still the same thing.
Yeah.
But I watch him now as a man who's supposed to be interacting and doing things in a certain, like, to grow his life and become the man he's supposed to be. And I watch him do that, and I'm like, I put that on him. I know I did. And that was something that my grandfather did to my dad, or my grandmother did to my dad, actually, and my dad did to us. Like, I see that generational stuff, and I'm just like, the thing with Wyatt is, like I said, I was on the phone with a friend, and I was like, I gotta change this, because if I can't break it in him.
Yeah.
I can't,
Yeah.
and I'll do whatever it takes to not break it in him. I would rather die than to
Yeah.
see him. He's a love, like that kid. He's
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
he's a perfect example. He is that deep feeling kid. Perfect example is with the baby. He is in that kid's face. That kid cries and he is on it. He's right in his face. He's touching him all the time. You're trying to change his diaper. It's really annoying, right?
Mhm.
He's the baby's crying and Wyatt's like laying over him, like, it's okay, buddy. And I'm like, bro, I can't do what I gotta do. And I started to do that this morning and I was like, what am I doing? This kid loves kids. He's gonna be an amazing father. He's gonna be so attentive. Like, shut up, Nate. Like, let him figure it out. Like, figure out the diaper. And honestly, he'll probably stop. If the kid pees on him, he'll probably back off anyway. So it's like, do not break this because it is fragile. And I have to build that resilience in him by guiding it and loving it and letting it express so that when the world crashes against it, he crashes back with no fear because he knows who he is.
Oh man, so many pieces you shared there gives me chills and just feeling
Yeah.
emotional. Just feeling that and feeling where that place touches in me too, and being a father. And oh man, just a couple pieces I want to touch on there is,
Yeah.
what you just what I really feel from you and what you just shared and expressed there, that I know in me has been, some of those wounded places that was just like what I longed for from my dad was what I feel like you just shared. And that was an accurate reflection to the gifts that he does carry, like your oldest
Mm-hmm.
son there.
Yeah.
And like what I'm really hearing is like you owning your material gives the space to attune to another being that's different, and like
Mm-hmm.
allowing and welcoming his gifts in that are different to like, whoa, to touch you. And I can feel how much that touches you. And I know that place in me, man, like without going right into it, like just where I feel that resonance, I can feel it now. Why that, when you were speaking on that one reel of like why it brought up emotion in me is like, oh, man, just feeling the journey of trying to be a father, not trying, but being a father in today's time with the tools and resources we were given is like
Yeah.
a lot of new tools need to come in, and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of teaching and openness to receive the teachings from the feminine of how
Yeah.
we've created her and how we are recapitulating her.
Yeah.
Because, man, being treated poorly growing up with aggression and, alcoholism in the
Mm-hmm.
household, and just emotional put down, verbal put down, physical put down, like that creates an imprint, for
Mm-hmm.
those listening, just what Nate's talking about are these generational pieces, is like we will just play out how we were treated if we stay unconscious. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you can have the thought and the idea of I'm going to do it different, but then when that moment happens where we were treated that way, guess what? The nervous system takes over and what it learned, and then delivers the same behavior.
Yeah.
And what I would want to reflect here, Nate, is I imagine it's like what you've created with your oldest wouldn't be the same as your dad. And I guarantee if you were even to like look at all those pieces, is there's a lot that's better.
Mm.
And really hearing that acknowledgement piece of like, and there's a lot that did
Yeah.
repeat. And then
Yeah.
just like thanks for speaking to that piece, because I really feel like for everyone listening, like this is really what it's about, is bringing in the compassion. And this is what I feel like, you're expressing here, is the self-compassion in the process of learning how to do this in a
Mm-hmm.
way where, I'm really hearing you weren't treated that well in certain places. I'm sure there's
Yeah.
lots of ways you were. And it's like
Oh yeah.
the negative impact of the church and the messaging that can come in there. And I'm like, God, my hands up. I know that one.
Yeah.
Really deep shame and guilt for, wanting to be in my sexual energy or power, or like,
Yeah.
whew, that creates a really big impact of then how I would treat others.
Absolutely.
Just
Absolutely.
such a big ripple. So I'm just glad. I just wanted to lay some more foundation there and just spread that out a bit, because I feel like this is where a lot of men get stuck. And I would love to hear from you what you notice as some patterns when men start engaging with your content, is,
Mm-hmm.
really seeing this pattern of like collectively as men, like there's a lot of deep rooted shame, and there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of like unresolved hurt that hasn't been repaired in a good way. And so then it just unconsciously plays out time and time again. So men just
Yeah.
sitting in there, like, instead of the appropriate dose of like, ooh, I didn't like what I did there. Ooh, I spanked my kid. Oh, that didn't feel good. yeah, I really need to look at what's happening inside of me that's happening. So where I see a lot of men get stuck is it happens and then they just shut down, withdraw, and go into such a toxic shame of I'm a monster, I'm just like my dad, and then start
Yeah.
drinking or smoking pot or porn to anything to numb out that reality of seeing that of like, oh no,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
avoiding it. And I'm curious, kind of some of the patterns that you notice. Those are some that I see as like the toxic shame, shutting down, withdrawing from life, numbing out. And what are you noticing with the people that are messaging you?
Yeah, I think that's actually a great understanding because what I see is a lot of people will say, "Dude, I tried this. Like I did this reel where I hold their face, and I'm like,
Mhm.
oh man, it'll make me cry. Like you already got me on the field, so I'm like gonna cry again.
Yeah.
It's like I'll hold their face, and I'm like, I'm so glad you're mine. Like you came to me, and I say that to all of them. I say that to the youngest right now. Like he's a baby, and I'll lean down and I'll say, I am so excited to see what you're going to do, and I'm so happy that you came to us so we get to be a part of that, whatever that is, right? So I
Yeah.
believe in the power of words, and I say that to my kids constantly. Like, words have power. You cannot talk to the others that way, but you can't talk to yourself that way. And that actually comes from
Yeah.
my inner self-talk of being like berating myself. Like I can hear the voice inside my head generally just coming at me, and so I'm like, don't, like, one, I know that I will be the voice in their heads. So I am trying as hard as I can to make that voice be the one that cheers them on as opposed to tells them that they're going to suck or whatever, right?
Mhm.
Um, they're going to have plenty of that. They might as well have their dad and the voice inside their head being the one that pushes them forward. So I'll say you can't talk like that to each other because words have power. What you're saying creates. And then I use that as part of it. And dude, I can't tell you how many people reached out to me. It like I will literally cry. I'll be reading. I guess I'm a crier, but like I
Me
will I
too.
will read. I love that, dude. I saw you tearing up, and I was like, my man, we're vibing. Um, but I will read some of them to my wife about these accounts where guys are like, I tried that and I did it. And the next thing I knew, they were curling up in my lap. They don't ever do that. Or they were hugging me, or they were like, that, like all of these things changed for them. And I'm like, just keep doing it. That's what I say when I respond. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. I'm like, I'm crying over here. Thanks for telling me that. Cause I love to hear those stories of men stepping into that and seeing how they get to connect. We're so disconnected, and that's the part that's the hard, is that we're so disconnected because when we spank or when we yell and we do all that, we disconnect from them, and then our response is what you said. It's toxic. We shut down. That's what I do. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do
Mhm.
that. So what I do is I completely, when I get mad like that and I do the stupid thing that I know I shouldn't do, I shut completely off. I walk out of the room and I don't want to talk to anybody. And
Mhm.
that makes them feel like they did something because now I've yelled
Yeah.
and now I'm not talking to them. And it's like, that is what a lot of men do, but it comes from embarrassment and, like you said, that shame. And then that's me hiding. It's just a different kind of hiding, right? It's
Mhm.
not me trying to cover up something that is in me that I'm trying to keep them from seeing. It's now me trying to hide from them. And dude, the hardest thing for me is to go back in and apologize because I got to go back in and face them, and
Yeah.
that sucks. That sucks, but it's the best thing I can do, you know.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so it's a lot.
Yeah, go
Go
ahead.
ahead, go ahead.
In my
I was just
imagining too, in my curiosity, there is like, is that familiar? Like, is that how dad would react? Like, it would go into
mm,
anger, then withdraw, not coming back, acknowledging what happened. Like, is that
sure.
familiar?
I don't know if it's familiar. It's familiar space for me because I was always hiding. And I mean,
Mm,
when we built, this is crazy that I'm thinking about this right now. It just popped in my head.
yeah.
I've always been I'm not afraid of the dark. I actually like it. When we shut down for the night, if I have to go downstairs to get something, I just walk out, like no lights. I just walk into the dark. It's like, I don't know what that's all about, but that's been that way. When I was 12, we were building our house and I would hide up in the rafters. Like I always loved being
Yeah.
up out of the way. But emotionally, again, I would do things and I would hide. So that's my go-to. So I can't say it's what my dad did. It's just my response to my own shame. It's my response to my own guilt. And it's like a warm blanket to just be alone, not talk to anybody, and to hide. Um,
Mm-hmm.
my wife is wonderful for that because she will come in with the lights on and like she's like, pull that blanket off of you. Not that I'm hiding under a blanket, but she will
Yeah.
come in and do that. Like, you can't do that. You know you can't. You know you got to fix this, that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
I love that about her. Like, she probably thinks I hate that about her, but it's actually, she has made me a better father because she won't let me hide, for
Ooh,
sure.
that gives me chills, and I want to go into that a little bit. There's a piece I want to circle back to, but that's like, ooh, that
Yeah.
I've noticed that in my own experience too, and I feel like this is where part of the disconnect has happened, is that allyship in
Mm,
showing up in the new ways, and how, and this is what I'm hearing for you, and if you have different words, I'd love to hear it, but what I'm hearing is like, I call it this, like this king queen dynamic, where it's like the queen able to hold the pain in the king in those tender places, so that
mm,
more of those admirable, honorable qualities of that king can come forward, but it's only in being held by the queen.
I like that.
And I'm,
That's awesome.
yeah, and I'm curious how, because for me, what I've noticed is like, I can't do it from the place of conditioning of the shame or that voice in my head. And man, I know that one too, brother. Like how quickly it comes in to just like shoot me down with like something I would never say to another person. And like,
Right.
whoa, that's the messaging of that collective consciousness. That's how I make
Mm-hmm.
sense of it now. And like, that's the message I adopted
Mm-hmm.
from that field that I grew up in. No one person's responsible for that, but that's where consciousness was at. And that's what I took meaning of with the way I was being treated or held or not held, or how everyone else was feeling their feelings or not. And
Right.
so what I found is like the queen, I call my partner Courtney the queen, is like when she can come in there and see that blind spot or see that tenderness and be like, you can't hide that from me. Like, what are you feeling? What's going on in there? And then
Yeah.
like getting to actually emote and lean in. What I notice from that, like in what what I find is like that internal repair, and like, oh, there's that king in me. But it's
Yeah.
only in that holding that that new piece can come forward. It's almost like in reciprocity of like how I see the king role. It's like the king then going out and providing safety and protection and play
Yeah.
for the village.
Yeah. 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 Like she will, it's funny because there are points where she will, I won't say she shuts down, but she will not want to talk about something. And I'm like, seriously, you will literally come in and push and push and push until I finally go, fine. And I tell you, and then you're so stubborn to not talk to me about whatever's bothering you. What is the deal? But but she's so good at that and so good for me. Honestly, man, I feel like I just realized that even more in this conversation, that she's so good for me there because my nature, or at least what, like how you put it, I like that, how I've adopted from the field in which I grew to hide in that. She's coming to lay it bare over and over again. Like, you can't hide that from me and I won't let you hide that from me. But the beauty of who she is that she's like that, like when you're in her, like her love, like when you're inside her love, you are fully protected. Like, she will kill everyone around us if she needs to. That's why she can't read comments on my reels, because if she reads it and she sees something she doesn't like, she will eviscerate that person. And I'm just like, look, like for me, I'm like, let it go, who cares? Like, I've gotten to that point where when it felt like I was going in the right direction, I knew I was going to take heat. I'm going to take heat for everything I say, and that's okay, because there's tons of people that maybe they don't agree with it, but they're like, I've never thought of it like that, and it helps me change who I am. And those are the people I'm trying to talk to. The
Mhm.
guy that's going to get on there and call me a snowflake, he's too far into his whatever to hear the conversation anyways. So I'm not worried about him.
Mhm.
So inside her like envelope of love, you are fully protected. And so
Mhm.
it's inside of that. The best way I can say this, and I say this to her a lot, the best way I can say this is, inside of that, I can take the armor off that I have
Yeah.
to wear outside the house. And so if she stabs me, I'm way more vulnerable, but she does not do that. She is
Yeah.
seeking to always heal and help.
Oh,
And she
yeah.
makes me a better dad for that reason right there.
Oh, yeah. And there's a few pieces that come in there. It's like what I hear in that the language I put to that is like that's the fierce feminine right there. It's like
Hmm.
the fierce feminine feeling the mission of her king that she's chosen to support and relate with and learn with and grow with. Of like that's the gift the fierce feminine brings of like get the fuck out of my king's way. This is the vision we're bring birthing to into
Right.
life. Like,
Hmm.
and I love feeling, I don't know her yet, but I love feeling that fire. And I don't know, have you seen the movie 300?
Oh, yes, yes.
There, what we're talking about here really reminds me of this one scene that always it plays into my mind so often. And it's, I don't know if you remember this scene. It's like um oh, the Russell Crowe when he comes back from battle and he's like he's kind of or sorry, he comes back from like talking to the Oracle or whatever, and he's
Uh-huh.
kind of feeling defeated because he feels this mission wanting to go forward, but the Oracle said something different, and he's kind of like
Yeah,
in this shamey, kind of vulnerable, his head's down, and
yeah,
then his queen just like takes him and then like holds him in that tender, vulnerable place and like holds him while he like, falls apart, and he just shares all of those insecurities. And then, as he feels through it, she then reminds him of his strength and re-encourages and reinforces
yeah,
like, what do you feel inside of you? What
yeah,
are you wanting to bring in? Like, don't lose that. Bring
yeah,
that to the world, and I've got you. And then they, the epic lovemaking scene,
yeah.
segue
Oh,
right there.
yeah,
And like that's what I get reminded of so often. Even what you're sharing is like, man, the amount of things for like men, I'll just speak, this is for my own, but every man I've ever met, like the
sure.
amount of insecurities, shame, doubt, fears, like fuck, that vulnerability needs to be held by a
Mhm.
being that has the capacity to hold it. And for me, that's the feminine. Like
Absolutely.
men can hold men and we do it beautifully and it's needed. And there's a part just to honor the role of feminine. Like there's a holding there that happens that is far beyond man, like males.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
needed to be able to put the armor back on to then go. Like I feel like it's this and that. And I feel like this
yeah,
is the reconciliation inside of each and every one of us, but also playing out in our relational dynamics is like, yeah, the queen needs to feel a man who has the capacity to fall down to his knees and show his humanness. Like,
yeah.
where are your weak points? Like, can you trust, even though she has that, you named it, she could stab you in there. And it's like, but do you have
That's
the
true.
strength and courage to drop your gear and to move towards that?
Yeah,
No,
and she wants that, right? Like
yeah,
that's the thing
yeah,
is I see it in my wife, and I could say a lot of men could probably say is that that's when they're always like, you don't talk to me, you don't share with me, you don't like
yeah,
all of those things. That's them saying, take your damn armor off. I want you. And
yeah,
our insecurities are like, I got to keep this on here. You could
right.
stab me here. It's constantly trying to keep ourselves protected because we feel like we have to do that outside of everywhere. From my standpoint, with Megan, my wife, like like she's got the same fuck you. It's like if she's
Yeah.
inside the love, if you're inside her love, it's like fuck everybody else, right? But then when I'm like down on myself or insecure, she's like, fuck you. You know you could do this. Get the fuck out there. And it's like,
Yeah.
you damn right I can. So it's like she not only protects, but then like inspires and reminds us, like you said, of Leonidas. What are you supposed to do? Go get that done because I believe in you. And
Mhm.
when we as men, it's hard because I feel like where I come from, I go, I have to lead that. And she's great at doing all the things and she's powerful. I love her so much. And I think I fell more in love with her just having this conversation with you. But like if I lead by saying I'm going to be vulnerable with you,
Mhm.
she is amazing at going, yes, be that way. Like, let me feel you, let me hold you, and then say, okay, but you can totally do this. Like, what are you supposed to do? Go do that, dude. This whole ride of like of Instagram stuff and trying to become what I really believe in my heart I'm supposed to be. She is standing there going, get the fuck out there and do it. You can do this, you know? She's the one that tells me, when I share something and it hits, she's the one that's always been like, you need to share that. That's the one you
Mm.
need to share. I'll show her stuff and she's like, that one is you for real. You need to share that one. And when it goes out and people resonate with it, I'm just like, yeah, she's spot on. She knows. It's amazing.
Oof, that is amazing. I just caught chills there because Courtney and I have that same dynamic, and this is what I extract from that is, this is the healing of the masculine and feminine coming
Mm.
together and working as a team is like
Yeah.
there are those different gifts, and this is what I keep feeling from Courtney is like, and I'm really feeling it from Megan is there is an intuition that's way deeper in the feminine that's attuning to the whole picture. It's
Yeah.
beyond the household. It shows up in the household. And it's like when I feel Megan be like, yeah, say that. Ooh, that's not like, ooh, that part's not you. Like say that. Oh yeah, say that, share that. Like
Hmm.
that's oh man, that just brings me so much excitement in those places of like, that's how it was always meant to be. Like
Yeah.
it's in that together space. It's in that we space where it's like the new thing can happen relationally. Like the
Yeah.
feminine has a vantage point. Like the masculine, not to strip our power. Like we have so much
No,
clarity in the vision of like the structures and like you showing up and delivering that message, but it's this unison of welcoming both sides
it's
and
true.
delivering from that place. Because the thing that I just wanted, the reason I'm sharing this is I feel it in you. It's a felt sense. And this is why I wanted to have a deeper conversation because what I really see in this new wave of leadership is there's been a message, not globally, but there's this message that gets shared of like what the man's doing and the man gets seen in the light. But then often if you were to go back and acknowledge what's true, it's like look at the feminine's role of the masculine even being able to do that,
Yeah.
where he
Yeah.
has been like picked up in those places of doubt and fear and insecurity, and it's both roles are what's making that happen, that gets projected of, oh, look at him, he did it on his own. No, it's together.
Absolutely. And to bring it back to fatherhood, I
Yeah.
think the part that I still struggle with it, but I'm trying to loosen my grasp, and I'm learning to do that, is most of us men, like lots of women will reach out to me and say, I'm so glad you're in this space saying this because we need men saying it. And the problem with that is not that guys don't want to learn from other guys, but that I feel like men do not want to hear the like ways of parenting from
Hmm.
their wives. We're
Yeah.
too arrogant in a way. Our ego gets in the way of listening to her. And I know that I've done that where she's been like, you can't do that. And I'm like, I'm going to do this or whatever. Or it's like, don't talk to me right now. Like that kind of thing. Whereas I get to share in this space because I'm a guy. And so people are like, oh my gosh, you're saying things that come from women have probably been saying this exact same thing for so long, but it's because I'm a dude and a dad that
Hmm.
makes it hit because lots of men don't want to hear it from their own wives. And I can say that from experience where I was like, I don't want to do that, but I don't want to listen. But if I, going back to that whole trusting her intuition and falling into her and her leaning into me and understanding that we combine to make this work, when I do that, my parenting gets better. And it's not that I'm trying to parent like her. That's the thing that guys got to get. I'm dad. I'm going to do dad things in the way of dad,
Hmm.
especially with boys, because it's just different. And I don't know how else to say it. I have 4 boys. I have 2 girls. I don't treat them and act the same with them, right? I'm not throwing my 3-year-old daughter. I threw my boys at 3 years old. I was like, yeah, like I
Yeah.
want to protect and keep her safe. With the boys, I want to push them out and let them experience. That's not because I want to keep my daughters from becoming something. It's just a natural tendency to like hold them, love them, and do something different. I don't know. I can't explain it. I just know that that's what I deal with. In all of that, I say if I'm willing to let her speak into that, I can become a better father to the children that have been given to me. And that's the whole point, is that if
Hmm.
guys will trust their wives and trust the feminine in that sense, they may find that the masculine side of fatherhood gets even better.
Oh my God, so much better. I feel like you explained that beautifully. And, what I really hear in that too is like each role is meant to be different. And there's like this dance of, the women informing the men, but vice versa. It's almost the men reclaiming their healthy tone. Like this is how the language I put to it of like the
Sure.
healthy tone and fire back of like, and there might be something you don't see that's different in the way that I might, that
Hmm.
my fatherhood is trying to move through me that you maybe don't notice yet. And
Yeah,
like how
absolutely.
and how often like, whoa, there's learning on both sides. Because
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
it's like both are needed. What I'm really hearing there too is like that reconciliation of, you bringing that awareness in where it was like, oh, just seeing that mirror and that reflection with your oldest son and being like, oof, okay, I got to show up different.
Yeah.
And what I really hear in that too, and just want to touch on a little bit, is the repair process.
Mm.
So, because see a lot of men, and I'm not sure if you see this, but a lot of men that get stuck in the part that we talked about earlier of like the shame spiral of like, oh,
Hmm.
I'm becoming my dad. They believe that story that that inner critic pounds down our throat. Like, look,
Yeah.
there it is. There's all the evidence. Yep, just like your dad, you're it's like, no, let's bring in some compassion, and like, okay, what is actually happening that's different? And the part that I'm hearing is bringing in repair. And because there's the part that happened, let's say with your oldest son, what does repair look like for you when it comes to, oh, I now have the awareness. I'm not feeling super stoked on my behavior or how I am showing up as a dad here. How do you then like take that reflection and show up different and then repair with whichever kid
Yeah.
in your life to start to build the new relationship and not get lost in the story of, well, I wrecked them, they're broken, I'm a terrible dad. Like how do you just accept what's
Yeah.
there and then move forward and repair?
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes with being able to this all comes back to growing as a human, right? My dad, my betterment as a man changed how I parented. It changed everything about how I lived, right? And so I think it comes down to that. And one of the things in growth is understanding I'm not perfect and
Mm,
I'm not going to do everything perfect. I think our parents had this concept, well, I'm the parent, so I know everything and I have to know everything. So you're going to do what I say and you're going to, like, I'm always right. And we got this concept, and it probably created a lot of rebellion, but we got this concept of like, well, my parents are always going to tell me what to do. Like, and so when you get to teenage land, you're like, fuck you. I'm not going to
yeah.
do that. You either do it blatantly in their face or you hide it, either one, but it's still rebellion. Um, and I think that's where we miss out as parents now. The thing that I think is changing is that if you're willing to go, hey, buddy, I screwed up, man. That wasn't cool. It wasn't cool for me to talk to you like that. The first thing my kids will say if I
Mm,
screw up, they'll be like, "It's okay, Dad," and I'll say, it's not okay, and you need to
mhm.
know that it wasn't your fault. Like it's not your fault that I can't control myself. It's not your fault that I can't handle certain things, and it's not on you to try to make things right for me to be able to handle life. In fact, it's my job to help you handle life. So I really screwed up right there, buddy, and I'm sorry. That is not an easy thing to say. And I told you earlier, like
Yeah.
sometimes I'll shut down and be like, no, I don't want to talk to him. I don't want to look at him. And I screwed up and I know it, and that's all my shame and guilt. But when I do that, everything starts to go the way of repair, right? Our kids when they're little, I think even our kids when they're older, like honestly, I said to Zeke, my oldest, I said, dude, we were actually I own a Christmas light hanging business, and it was just me and him, and we were taking down lights at the end of the last, not this past season, the last season. And I was like, dude, I was a dick. Why do you even want to hang out with me?
Mm,
And he was like, Dad, you you didn't know any better. He's like, I'm watching you, and you're different because you know different now. You just didn't know any better then. And I was like, well, I guess I've completed fatherhood. You're now on your own. I'll see you later. It's one of those like, wow, what in the world? But when he said that, I realized even Yeah, honestly, at 43, my relationship with my father is not fantastic. We've had a bunch of crap in between us for over the past couple of years. And honestly, if he came to me and said, Nate, I screwed up a bunch of stuff and I was not the way I could have been. I'm so sorry. If he'd do that, then I can tell you right now, as a 43-year-old man, I'd be like, Dad, thanks. Like that means a lot.
Mhm.
So I don't feel like it's an age thing where you can start repair. I think you can start it at any point. I'd rather catch dads at a point where they're early on and we don't have to repair the problem. In fact, we
Mhm.
can just lead them into the life we want to see them live. But if you're past that point and you have, you're 11, 12, 13, they've got phones or they've got friends where they're hanging out more and you see them less, I still think you can repair that by just starting to apologize. But the number one thing we got to do then is fix the action,
Mhm.
right? Because I can apologize all I want, and what that's going to internalize for them is dad's full of shit. He apologizes, but he never changes anything. And
Mhm.
uh, and so changing the action and them seeing it is, in my opinion, is the biggest part of that.
Oof, yeah. Mic drop there. It's like how many people have the hurt where it's like the actions aren't matching the words.
Mhm.
And so what I really heard in your process there of the repair is noticing that discomfort, the shame, actually, being in that seat of observation of like, oh shit, I'm doing that thing I do. I
Mhm.
shut down, I just walked away. But then
Yeah.
moving through that discomfort and like finding that strength to be like, oh, I gotta say the thing to them and like own it and acknowledge
Yeah.
it. And what I really loved that you do in there too is like if they bring in that piece of, oh no, dad, it's okay, you bringing in that mature place of like, no, it's not okay.
Yeah.
Like it's not okay that that happened, and this is where that came from. And like what I really hear in that, that's honoring both sides. It's like that actually isn't ideal health in
Yeah.
development that I want to offer. So like
Right.
to give that imprinting of like, I see that, I'm owning that, I'm working on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
that's what I really hear in the new action. And then for all the men that are listening that maybe wherever they're at in their journey of being a dad, like what would you say are some of the biggest tools if they're in that place of, oh, I keep saying the thing, but I'm not showing up different? Like what would you
Mm.
say to that dad first?
That is a fantastic question.
Mhm.
I think that dad needs to look into his own willing. You need to look into the promises that you breaking to yourself. Is probably
Mm.
where I would say to go,
Yeah.
because your confidence lowers when you break your promises to yourself. You basically are lying to you, and if you're willing to lie to you, then you're willing to lie to anyone, right? And so I say a lot that self discipline is the best discipline for our children. And what I
Mm.
mean by that is every action that I take. You said that like they'll see that our words and our deeds do not correlate. Well, that makes me a liar, and what they will follow is my deeds, not my words.
Yeah.
So again, I get the as a dad, we get the ability to watch little mirrors, right? They're just all around reflecting who we are while they're growing up in our house. So they say what we say, they do what we do. So what am I seeing that I'm like, no, you can't do that. Don't do that. Oh, wait, I do those things, right? Okay, now I've got to change who I am as a person. What's the disciplines that I need to be doing? I'll go to, I became a better dad when I started working on my own health, right?
Mm.
So the moment you do that, you're able to say, well, the discipline of going to the gym, working out, being willing to work out hard. Now I'm keeping, if I keep that promise to myself, I've started to keep one promise. What's another promise I can keep?
Mm.
And start creating your own self-discipline. I think Jocko Willink says that leadership comes like self-discipline is the best kind of leadership, right? Because if
Mm.
you can lead yourself, then you can lead others. Well, I can't lead my kids if I can't lead myself.
Yeah.
So go down the path of doing hard things and becoming a man who does things he doesn't really want to do,
Mm.
because it hardens your mind in a way that makes you do more of the things you don't want to do, but
Mm.
gets you the results you want to get. And I think that enables you to then say, I'm sorry, buddy, I shouldn't have done that. I'm working on it. And then they'll see you do that. Even in those moments where you got to like, they're just stressed, like everything is going, and you're like, oh my gosh. And then all of a sudden they watch you breathe in and calm and then go, hey man, I really need you to try something else. They will, it'll click back in that subconscious of, I watched him change. He would have yelled at me right there. And I don't know what that was, but
Yeah.
whatever dad just did, I want to see more of that. And they will see you changing.
Ooh, yeah, that's such a powerful piece of like seeing where the mirror is and knowing that you're offering over that new experience in the moment by
Yeah.
taking personal responsibility. I'm hearing really inlaying those
Mm-hmm.
disciplines. And I'm curious, like, you know, what other like key insights that you've found so valuable is like becoming that, like shaping this new version of being a dad,
Yeah.
seeing the impact of being unconscious, playing out the patterning, but now paving this new way. What
Yeah.
are some other like key tools that you really want to share with other dads listening, or like soon to be dads, or
Yeah.
resisting being dads because of these pieces not figured out yet? And like,
Yeah.
what other pieces do you want to drop here for them?
I think that I guess one of the ones I've shared with my kids constantly is that I think dads could really use, especially because we don't like to show emotion.
Mm,
Obviously, I've shown you that like we're okay with showing anger, but we're not we don't like showing the emotions that make us look vulnerable. So like crying and things like that. So I guess what I would say is if you will just try one thing, it's if you think it, say it, especially if it's good. If it's negative, really process some of that, right? You don't need to be critiquing everything. But the good things, say something. My daughter, when my oldest daughter, 17, when she was, I don't know, 6, she saw this girl at a restaurant and she had bright blue hair. That was not very normal at the time. And she's like, I love her hair. And I said, go tell her because this
mm,
world is full of people who are negative and they don't get to hear the positives very often. So go tell her that. So this
mm.
6, 7 year old little girl walks up to a table of these girls and says, I just wanted to let you know, I love your hair. Then you watch their whole like, oh my gosh, thank you so much, and all that. I did it with Zeke one time. He was a little older. I think he was like 10 or 11. And he looks at me, he's like, Dad. And we were walked into this restaurant. I don't know what's the stories about restaurants, but we walk into this restaurant and the hostess, she's like this pretty little 16-year-old. I mean, he's got no chance. He's 11, she's 16 or older, right? And he's like, she's beautiful. I said, go tell her, watch what happens. And he goes, I wanted to tell you that I think you're beautiful. There's like no sexual thing there, right?
Yeah.
Because he's too young. So it just like watch her face light up. Other people across the side of the room are like, oh, that was amazing. Like watching that happen, everybody in the room benefited from his willingness to say what he was thinking. And
Mm,
it's especially her, but
mm,
he benefited from being vulnerable and being strong. She benefited from hearing something that nice about herself, and everyone else got to see this little kid do something that's somewhat scary. I mean, if dads are willing to say what they think when it comes to how wonderful their children are, change the landscape. They'll change the game.
oh, yeah. Oh, I know all those places too. Just watching the children embody the new thing, especially when it comes to it, that emotional capability of saying those uncomfortable truths,
Yeah,
especially when it's nurturing connection, is like game changer.
for sure.
Oh, is there anything else like that you want to share just before we end here? Like any dad insights or anything you just want to speak to all those dads that are listening that, you wished you had heard years ago when you first started raising that your first son there?
Yeah. I kind of said it already, but don't be afraid to be dad. You don't have to be mom and just be a man,
Mm,
right? Don't be afraid to be dad. Um, but also don't be afraid to be humble. Be humble enough to learn.
mm.
Because if we're too arrogant, we'll learn nothing. And when we're humble, there's all sorts of things that we can glean from our wives, from people around us, from our children. And you live a way better life when you're humble enough to let others teach you.
Yeah. And one last piece I'm curious about is, you know, and I'm curious if this plays out in your life anywhere. Are there any places where maybe there was emotion that came up that was bigger than what you could handle, or bigger than even, what Megan could handle, where you've had to lean into support? Are there any of these places in being a dad where you are supported by either other men? Do you have mentors, books? Like what does Nate's support look like to be able to show up in this new way beyond just awareness?
Yeah, I'm part of a community of dads. Like I have one, but I also am part of a community of
Mhm.
dads who are striving to just be better men and
Mm,
sharing things there, things like that. So that's massive. You need other dudes striving and going the same direction to help make you better, right? Being around people. If you're the smartest person in the room, you need a new room.
yeah.
Like if you're the strongest guy at the gym, you probably need a new gym because somebody's got to push you, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that having other people around that are striving to do something like what you want is that's a great way to grow and be better. Books wise, man, the Whole Brain Child is one that I can't recommend enough. I love Dr. Shafali. She wrote a book, I think it's called the Conscious Parent and the Conscious Parenting
Conscious
Plan.
parenting. Yeah.
Yeah, that book was awesome and really gives you good insight. Gabor Mate, dude, that guy, he takes everything back to childhood trauma, right? I mean,
Yeah.
everything in our lives. But he helps you see that process so well that he's just one to follow for everything. I love that guy. I think he's great, and he's got wonderful insights, and he's got the distance. He's had kids; they're grown, so he has the full gamut of little and older kids now, all of that. So, and he's a dude. That's the thing. For guys, sometimes I'm like, yeah, I could tell you about women that are doing this, but I always wanted, I would want it from a guy as well. Like, yes, have the humility to listen to women, but I'm a guy and I'm a dad. So how do dads do this? That like so Gabor Mate, the guy who wrote the Whole Brain Child, Daniel, I'm totally blanking on his last name, but that's another. He's a doctor, but I mean, as much as you can get from like guys around you and guys ahead of you, do it. Find that old guy that has like grandkids and great grandkids and ask him questions.
Hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What you're speaking to is such a passionate piece for mine too. And just all those men listening, if you don't have some sort of like wolf pack or men's group, like look for it, Google it. If
Mhm.
you don't even know where to look, just start Googling different type of groups, dad groups. And I'm curious, you said you have one.
Yeah,
But before you share that, there's just a piece
sure.
you spoke to that I want to touch on. And that is like this piece where it came up a few times of, how you needed to hear certain pieces from a man.
Hmm.
And, this has actually been a theme that's come up this week. Both my partner Courtney and I support people, and from the feminine lens, there's been this frustration of like working, her as a female working with men, expressing time and time again, like you got to feel your feelings, you got to learn how to feel your feelings. And then it's like, I'll come in there and then I say it and it's like, yeah, and then blah, and then the tears come out. And the reason I'm sharing that is like I feel like what we're touching on there is that is just the appropriate initiation that's meant to pass down from man to man.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
like if that isn't felt in the nervous system, it's impossible to access. It's like
yeah,
a female can't tell a man how to be a man. He can invoke and hold a man and welcome into becoming a man, but he can't tell him how to do it, and vice
it's true.
versa. And
Yeah,
so,
so
like,
true.
just really encouraging, like, if there's been this place of like, you're not feeling your feelings, this is why, or whatever it is, or you can't execute that thing. And you hear Nate talk about discipline, and you're like, yeah, I know that, but I keep fucking it up. It's like,
Yeah,
get connected with other men who can actually support, be accountability partners, who can hear your emotional process of what's coming up. What's the story you're telling yourself where you're not executing that thing, that new
yeah,
habit. Like, I wouldn't be able to even have this conversation with you, to set up the structures, to have a podcast, have these conversations, if I didn't have men to lean into.
right.
My men's circle every Wednesday, being supported by other men, wanting to
Yeah,
look and uncover all these places to do it in a new way. Like we're really not meant to do it alone. So Nate,
true.
brother, thanks for being an ally and being a man in today's world, a
Absolutely.
dad, a conscious dad who I judge is doing it in such a beautiful way, paving the new way, taking responsibility, holding space for what's true in your kids, and just showing up the best you can every day, even when
Yeah.
there's those trolls and haters putting down the message that's moving through you. Man, it's been such a joy. And yeah, I hope to have you on the show again. I feel like there's so many more conversations I want to have from this, but thanks for showing up and everything you've shared with the audience.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, thank you, man. Seriously, I love doing this. I love sharing it, so I'm happy to do it.
Yeah. And then, so before you go here,
Yeah,
how do people start following you? And if there's a man here that's listening, they're like, oh man, shit, I need that men's group.
yeah,
What's the group that you offer? What are other ways that you offer other
yeah.
men? And then how do they get a hold of you?
Sure. So best way to catch me is DM me on Instagram. It's at dads underscore don't underscore babysit. You can catch me at Nate at dadsdon'tbabysit.tv. That's my email. And the group is it's the concept I have is that even in the midst of trying to be this conscious and gentle father inside my house, there is this deep-seated feeling of protection for my family and like this savage feeling like what happens if someone comes into my house, what do I have to do? Like the onus is on me to be the protector when that happens, right? My wife isn't coming down the stairs in the middle of the night, I am. But the if I don't have the savage ability to handle that situation in a way that keeps my family safe, if I don't have that prepared, then when I need it, it's not there, right? So I say all the time, I'd rather need it and not have it, or have it not need it, than need it and not have it. And so talking about how am I a savage and a gentle, like how am I a gentle savage, basically, and working through that with guys. And so they can just DM me on Instagram, and I'll shoot them over the link for that. And it's a Dads Don't Babysit group where we talk about conscious fatherhood, gentle fatherhood, but also being a savage man that nobody wants to mess with either.
Yeah. Feel that. Yeah. We can't do with too much of that. More of that, more of
Right?
men showing up in both, being able to be that sensitive, but also powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, powerful warrior.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks, brother. Such an honor
No,
to have you on the show.
no problem, man. Thank you.